everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. My name is Karen A, and I'm here in Jerusalem. I am delighted to host you today in the Afro-Euro Reco12 podcast. We are a family of recovery resources that you could check out at reco12.com. We have podcasts addressing all addictions, all afflictions, as well as big book studies, shares, where you can listen to and identify with so many different fellows of different colors, different religions, different nationalities, different addictions, et cetera, et cetera. We all strive for recovery, for a connection to our higher power, and recovery one day at a time through the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. If you would like to share, you could hit us up on reco12.com. You could reach out to us, or you could WhatsApp me directly, and I'll put my number in the chat. Reco12.com. We have some costs to support our Zoom and technical stuff. You could contribute a seventh tradition by going to reco12.com/support. If you would like to share, I'm happy to hear from you. Or if you'd like to get in touch with any of our speakers, again, feel free to go to reco12.com. I'm delighted today to introduce you to Golda, who will be sharing her experience, strength, and hope with you. That'll go on for about 20 to 25 minutes, and then we'll take a Q&A from the audience. Golda, welcome. We're so thrilled to have you.
Welcome. Welcome to you. Thank you. It's great to be here. Are there other people listening besides the people on the Zoom meeting right now, or for now it's just whoever we see? Right.
So great question.
Recorded.
So the people who are listening live are on the Zoom, and then it's downloaded by hundreds of people from reco12.com. The average Zoom presentation gets about 300, 350 downloads. So thank you for sharing. It makes a difference.
Yeah. Thank you. Hi, my name's Golda. I am very multi-addicted person, and therefore I've had many opportunities to search and find my higher power. There's been many paths. I'm sorry, I get very emotional very quickly. It's crazy, but I'm fine. Don't worry. So I've been So I'm in my early 70s at this point. So I've been in recovery since my early 40s. So it's been 30 years of tunneling into different rooms and different times. So obviously, if I really told my story, we'd be here 24 hours about. So I'm not going to do that. So it's wonderful to have this like blank check, like just whatever you want to talk about, whatever, whatever. It's an amazing thing. And it's a very special opportunity to help my own recovery and to hopefully help somebody else with their recovery. So where I am today, right now, is that I am living in the steps every day as my solution, is a way of life for me at this point. I take people through the big book, through the chapters to work the steps very quickly. And then we stay, what I learned, and I'll talk about my story, how I got here, to do 10, 11, 12 whenever I'm disturbed. I have a list of a wonderful, amazing, thorough list of defects that I say my disturbance. I pick the defect from selfish, frightened, dishonest, and self-seeking, post it in a text to my sponsor. I say a prayer. I write out the prayer, one sentence, and then I say I'm going to help someone. And then I call a newcomer. And I do this in and out all day. And I teach my sponsees to do this all day. I only send my 10 steps to my sponsor. and of course my nightly inventory, the whole thing. Well, in the morning meditation. But I wanted to say that because it's relatively new for me. It's almost 2 years old that I learned to do this, 30 years of being in fellowships, wonderful fellowships. And I'm going to talk about the recovery I've been through. It's been amazing. The promises keep coming true layer by layer by layer. And yet I never learned to do this throughout my day. I think in the 12 and 12, they call a spot check inventory. And it just made all the difference in the world. So I'm not sludging through my brain trying to get control and push things aside and, you fight my way through my day and really let God in and be of service all day. All right. So I was born in once upon a time, I was born in a middle-class little town in Long Island in the 50s. And I had a lot going for me, a lot of wonderful gifts and strengths in my family. I have a lot of wonderful gifts and strengths. Creative, I'm smart, we were funny. In my family, we were always being humorous in my family. It was a definite defense mechanism, but it's a wonderful thing anyway. And, there was a lot of love in my family. But what I learned at a very early age, somehow I got the message that I was going to have to take care of myself from the get-go. And I don't know that I'm not going to go into why. It doesn't matter. God put me in that house. God wanted my soul to go through all this. It's fine. And thank God for the steps. I totally, I'm not resenting my family anymore. I'm going to stop crying. Okay. God is going to help me because this is being recorded. This is not okay. Okay. So, it's really beautiful. So, but I learned very early. I was on my own. Thank you, Tammy. And my first two drugs of choice, 3-4 years old, was fantasy, living in fantasy. I have an amazing imagination, which could be a blessing or a curse, but I really do. So I was making up stories in my head from the time I was really little, which morphed into television, movies, and novels. So that was one of my first drugs of choice. And codependency was the simultaneous other drug of choice. And I want to really clarify this because this is about a year old for me that I have really learned about the true disease of codependency. I used to think I understood, we're all codependent, we all enable people, we get too attached to what they think of us, blah, blah, blah. But what I learned the hard way, as all my lessons were learned the hard way, is that some people have codependent traits. I mean, I think a lot of people in recovery, get codependent different ways, different times, violate boundaries, whatever, people pleasing, bossing people around, trying to save people. And then it's like alcohol. Some people have a drink once in a while. Some people, when they're really upset, get drunk once in a while, but they're not trying to control it. And that's what I learned about codependency. I am a chronic, hopeless variety codependent that actually progressed. So, like all our addictions, if we're chronic, they always progress. So while I'm working the steps and all these other issues and getting results and getting recovered, the codependency was doing push-ups. There'd be interim relief at certain times, but it would always come back with a vengeance. And I would end up just bottoming out, just barely functioning around people. And anyway, so being codependent, I've learned, just like picking up a drink, is seeking ease and comfort. I'm seeking ease and comfort in obsessing about people and trying to control them, or trying to control myself. And that behavior gets me out of my restlessness, irritability, and discontent, just like food or alcohol. So this has been an incredible lesson this year. It's changed my life. And so those were my first two drugs. All right. Okay. So, and then food came quickly after that. I was always sugar and flour in my mouth, one way or another, on the way home from school, anywhere I could get it. You know, my parents didn't keep a lot of it in the house, but boy, when they did it, I was obsessing about who was going to eat it, and, you know, the whole 9 yards. The thing was, I was really skinny, really skinny. I was always being told, you're too skinny, you're too skinny. I never gained an ounce. So I grew up feeling entitled to eat. I mean, I'm supposed to eat. I'm supposed to get fat, right? Get fatter. And so I didn't have to hide it. I didn't have to pretend, nothing. You know, people, good, you're eating, good. And I ate large amounts. And the only one who really noticed it as maybe something weird about it was my father. And he'd watch me eat these huge desserts and say, you know, you're not going to eat all that. You're not going to be able to eat all that. I don't know why he said that, because I always ate all of it. But looking back, I think he was giving me a hint, like maybe you shouldn't eat all this. You know? But anyway, I was a big eater, and a definite, and by the time I was in my 20s, my early 20s, I knew I had a problem with sugar. So I was fighting with sugar my whole adult life, trying to control it, enjoy it, control it, you know, the whole drill. And that did that has progressed. Okay. So that was the next addiction. And then in my okay. So I was taught that I'm supposed to save the world. I could tell you all kinds of stories how my mother communicated that to me. Everything's my fault, but I'm also the savior. And I really, really have this complex. I still do, that somehow I'm supposed to save everybody and everything in the world. And I got it in utero, by the way. It's crazy. So by the time I was in my late 30s, I became a plumber, a non-traditional worker, they called it then, because I loved fighting with people. I loved fighting, you know, so I was going to fight sexism, and I was going to, you know, don't tell me I can't use a wrench, you know. And my father was a cabinet maker, and I really did respect people that worked in the trades, and I loved it. So I got into it. I got strong, and I was working on construction sites. And that's when the drinking really took off, and I became a blackout drinker there. And let me just ask God for help here. Yeah. This was the thing. The other big handicap, I have two main handicaps. One is ADHD. I was born with it. My father had it. I still have it. I think it is progressive as you get older. But so impulsive, just talking, you know, throwing things, not having sensitivity to the nuances of other people's needs, you know, and just needing attention, and very impulsive and rude. And I didn't learn social skills at home either. I was blamed for everything in my house. So I became not well liked. And this developed, and I read an article actually, that kids with ADHD often develop into having social phobia. So by the time I went away to college, I was paranoid, self-conscious, hypervigilant. And that is where actually I used drugs there, but Thank God that is the one substance I never became an addict of. I abused it. I used it socially. I never bought any. I only used it because it was there and it was the only way I could deal with being around anybody. But I didn't think about drugs. I never had to worry about it. So nice, certain things I didn't have to worry about. So I started doing drugs there though. So that I was actually getting better in high school. I was actually, I was unpopular. I was very unpopular. I was arguing with people in classrooms because I was comfortable intellectually, because my mother was very intellectual and she would analyze everything with me. And so I knew how to think and talk. So I would be in a classroom angrily arguing with teachers and students about ideas in a book as if, and then walk in the hallways terrified, full of fear, social fear. So I was really a lopsided human being. It's like, all right. So, right. So that's important. And the other thing about me is the best thing about me. The best thing is this a gift from my higher power. I didn't grow up religious at all. We'd grow up with nothing. We knew we were Jews. That was it, very secular. But I was always looking for God. I was always searching for something up there. Like I love thunderstorms because it meant there was something big out there. I love rainstorms and looking at the ocean because it meant there's power out there somewhere. And in college, in high school, I read all these books, Siddhartha, and learned how to meditate. I didn't think there was anything to learn from Judaism. I had no idea. But yeah, I was a searcher, and that was a great thing. And this, this went on throughout my life. So let's catch up and be a little chronological. So there I am on construction sites because you know why? Because I'm going to save the world from classism. I was a bona fide religious leftist. That's where my spirituality was. I got involved in kind of a weird culty group for about 13 years. I learned whatever, it doesn't matter. And I really got converted to this, that we have to save the world. And each one of us, human beings are the ultimate. There is no higher power. Human beings are the ultimate, just what, is talked about in the big book, thinking we're the alpha and omega of the universe. And we have to fix everything. So this fed right into the grandiosity I already had, and pressure I lived with, that it was up to me to fix everything and everything is my fault. And I got caught up in that for 13 years. And I became a blackout drinker during that time. And I would be eating sugar and drinking large quantities of beer. And I remember not knowing why I was always so fatigued. And then I remember going to this homeopathic doctor, took my blood, and he said, "There's a lot of yeast in your blood." Like he didn't understand it. And I said, "I don't know. Who knows?" But, that beer and sugar together can have weird effects on your system. So what eventually happened, so my 30s were that was my dark decade. I was just going down, 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 down in codependency and alcoholism and sugar and trying to save the world. And then, there's, that story. I love the story where Ebby suddenly gives a call to Bill out of nowhere. Like all of a sudden one day the phone rang, and this is, we all have that. God steps in without our doing the steps, without doing anything. God will step in at different times, share his light if we care to pick up on it. And my mother, I'm in my 30s, a blackout drinker, miserable, depressed. I have pictures of that time. I looked like a wreck. Anyway, my mother became religious. She became an observant Jew. Don't ask. She has her story. It's an amazing story. She was in her 50s. I wasn't living at home anymore. But somehow I started to ignite. And I always had this in me. Like as a child, I would talk to God with no religious training at all. So I started to talk to God again in my late 30s, and I started to long for something. And then I started to go to retreats and classes and study Torah and study my religion. And this happened in my late 30s. And I'm still a total unrecovered addict, a raving addict. Also, I'm a debtor. I was debting. I didn't know how to spend money. And I probably have to make this quicker. So what happened was I had I found teachers. It was amazing. I really had a spiritual awakening while being totally shut down in my isms, but somehow God pierced it. And so for 5 years, I was on a honeymoon, and it really makes sense in terms of what Dr. Silkworth says about, or Dr. Carl Jung says, we need a psychic change. And I had temporarily a spontaneous psychic change. I felt connected. I was having white light experiences like crazy. I traveled to Israel. I lived in New York. I mean, I really had like, wow, there really is God, and he really does care about people, and history has meaning, and there's so many things to learn. It was so wonderful. And I had my drinking stopped spontaneously, and my eating never. Matter of fact, you become a religious Jew and you definitely have to eat more. I mean, you're like Friday night, Saturday, I'm with families and they're like eating and eating it. So that was when actually I started gaining weight in my late 20s. So that's when I started to try to control my eating for the first time. But when I became religious, yeah, that really was troublesome to me. That now I was really eating huge amounts of food because I never would cook for myself like the way these people cook. So that was one issue that was there right away. But my alcoholism went into remission, and my codependency and ADHD went into remission. I was happily sitting at people's tables. I was happily going to people's celebrations. I was studying Torah. I was buying books and actually reading nonfiction books on my own at night, alone in my apartment. I mean, I only read novels before this, trashy novels, And so I had a grace period, like 5 or whatever years. And then at some point, I was getting more and more depressed, just creeping up on me. I was obsessing now about alcohol all the time. And I left being a plumber, and I became, I started to work a more ladylike profession. I was like a secretary in a yeshiva in a school. So there was no buddies I could go out and drink with. And and the social phobia, the paranoia, the consciousness came back. All these things started rushing back. And I didn't know, I'm telling you this because of all the step work, the hindsight. But at the time, all I knew was I was sinking fast. And one summer, I felt beyond depressed. And I decided to make a trip to Israel. It was like my third time, like a few weeks. And I went and I prayed. I just went there to special sites where, people pray. And I prayed my brains out for 2 weeks because I didn't know what was wrong. But I was already in Debtors Anonymous, by the way. My mother told me about Debtors Anonymous because I was always going to her to get me out of trouble every 6 months. So I knew about the 12 steps now, but that was it. And I tried to do a 4th step in DA. I didn't even remember my life. It's the weirdest thing. I didn't know why. I didn't even know my jobs. I was a blank slate. So I come back from Israel, and then that spring in May, I found AA. And that was the real rebirth. That was the real rebirth. Because even though I wasn't drinking the large amounts I used to drink and drive, I would drink huge amounts. And then when I became religious, it became very different, very ladylike, but I was always obsessing about alcohol and trying to drink as much as I could get away with. So once I got into AA, even though I didn't get the steps, it took me a while to get the steps, something shifted right away. Everything shifted. Like I started to become more teachable. You could actually explain things to me. You could say, you know what, Golda, actually the sky isn't blue. It's not green, And I'd say, oh, really? I mean, you couldn't tell me anything. I'm telling you, I was impossible to get along with, before anything spiritual happened to me. I was always arguing, always defensive, or I was apologizing for breathing, So, yeah, so AA was a big turning point. And finally, it took me, I think, 4 years in AA. I was sober. I was dry, and I could not get the fourth step. This is amazing. I knew when I heard those guys sharing, qualifying, laughing at themselves, and I wanted what they had so bad. Like, I took myself so seriously, even though I had a good sense of humor. I had a good sense of humor, but not about me. It was like, you can't tell me anything. And I knew it though. By then I knew it, and I wanted what they had. I wanted to be able to stand up, tell my story, talk about how selfish and self-centered I am. I wanted that more than anything. And for 4 years, it was 4 years. Every time I tried to do an inventory, it came out as a psychological profile. I was very analytical. I have low self-esteem, and I would say these things about myself, and I'd read it to my current sponsor, and nothing, everything, nothing went on to a 6th, 7th, 8th, nothing. It did. I knew it wasn't. I think 2 or 3 times I did that. And finally, I had a sponsor, and she just said, go do your fourth. Of course, you go through the first 2 steps, blah, blah, blah. And I just was stuck. And I finally, I was listening to AA circuit speakers then in my car all the time. And there was one speaker that I listened to his tapes over and over and over, because he was one of the few alcohol. I mean, I love going to AA meetings. I loved hearing war stories. That's when I realized I was a blackout drinker. I didn't even know that I drove drunk until I'm listening to people qualify. But this was the first guy that I really, really, we got each other. He talked about having a chip on his shoulders, huge chip on his shoulders, but a huge coat hanging over it of shame on top of that chip. And I couldn't describe myself any better. I mean, I hated people. I loved fighting with people. I loved arguing, but then I would be mortified and feel like killing myself because everyone hates me. And he talked about having potential. He never fulfilled his potential. I'm ADD. That's all I ever heard. I mean, and he was funny, really, really funny. So I was getting closer, and I actually found him, called him. He was in California. I said, I can't do my 4th step. Now, this guy is a Pacific guy. If you know AA Pacific group, they don't mess around. They're not very nice. He said, you've been in 4 years and you haven't done a 4th step? I said, no, I can't do it. I don't know why. He said, and you've really been dry? You haven't drank, really? I said, yeah, I haven't. He said, just do whatever your sponsor tells you to do. And basically, he hung up on me. That was it. But believe it or not, that night, I was in my little office in my basement apartment, and I just cried to God, literally. I sobbed. I just said, you have to write it. I can't write my 4th step. I can't do it. And I was like, I live alone, so I could get away with this kind of noise. And I just begged God to write my 4th step. And he did. He did. That was my first 4th step. I sat at my computer. It was like he was dictating over my shoulder with so much love. I had 3 pages, single space about my mother, just my mother, every little thing I resented about my mother. So for 2 or 3 weeks, I just wrote whenever I wasn't working. I just sat and wrote and did my 4th step. And I realized looking back, I did the first 3 steps, right there. I can't do this. You can do it. And I'm giving it to you to do it. And that was like the most heartfelt first 3 steps of my entire life, Anyway, so that was the real first psychic change of my life. After I did that work and I read it to my sponsor and we went on with the other steps and I made amends. All my amends, by the way, at that time were all sexual in nature, by the way. I didn't even talk about that. But anyway, I made those amends and I knew I was a different person. I was, on my way. So that was AA. And, that was about almost 30 years ago. So thank God. But, then we tunnel because the other addictions are doing push-ups. So that's it. So how much time do I have? So actually, what I'll say now is my food disease. What?
You can keep going, Gloria. You have some more time.
Okay, I'm Golda, but that's okay.
You
Yeah.
can go for another 5-7 minutes.
5 minutes? Okay, good. 5-7 minutes. Okay,
You can even take
perfect.
7.
Okay, thank you very much. So with the food, it was a slower progression. And I was in and out of food programs, fellowships over the years, it would work for a while and then I would get obsessed again, and there was that, kept progressing. And while I was living in Brooklyn, I was always thinking about food, stealing food, the whole 9 yards. Now, my weight, as I said, started to go up. So I'll just say my top weight, I was never obese. My lowest weight is 115 pounds. My top weight was 165 pounds when I was really in my heyday. So, of course, I know it. I see my face and my belly and I look horrible, I think. But I've always had thin arms and legs. So anyway, so finally, what I'll just sum up quickly about the food. I did workbooks. You know how fellowships have these different workbooks. And I'm not putting them down because I'm sure they help a lot of people. I did my workbooks. I talked to my sponsor. I did service. I did all these things. And it would, I would be okay. And then I would binge again. So finally, we decided to move to Israel 8 years ago. And the whole first year before we moved, I couldn't stop flour and sugar. It had progressed beyond, I didn't really believe I was a compulsive overeater like other people because I always felt entitled to eat large amounts. Nobody ever shamed me for that. Just sugar. I just have a sugar. But finally, it progressed to the point where I knew I belonged in a food fellowship. And when I got to Israel, I found a very strict program. It worked this is important. It worked for 6 or 7 years. I was neutral around my food. I didn't change from a string bean to a broccoli without telling my sponsor. I weighed and measured everything. I followed all the tools. They did their steps in like these year-long process, but it wore off. And because the disease always progresses. And then I found a fellowship. This is where I found out about the real 10, 11, 12. Almost 2 years ago, I found a big book fellowship where you go through the big book and then you live in 10, 11, 12. No food plan, no weighing and measuring, nothing. They don't want to even know about your food, basically, except if you need to write a disturbance about it, do the step work. And that's all I could do because I couldn't weigh and measure anymore. I couldn't do any of that anymore. And I've been doing that ever since. It took a while before I got happy with my food. It took a while, a lot of step work, a lot of frustration. I wasn't binging, I wasn't face down, but I was not happy until about 2-3 months ago. I found my way to eat how God wants me to eat. And I'm so grateful. And then I'll just quickly say, I came to Israel 8 years ago. I bottomed out on media. Remember, I said I was a fantasy, TV, books. that had morphed into a progressive illness of spending night and day on media, TV, streaming, movies, audio novels, games. By the time I got to Israel, forget it. And I couldn't find a 12-step program. And then I found a meeting, and then quickly tell you, I helped their founders that started a Media Addicts Anonymous fellowship. And I definitely helped build that fellowship. That was 4 years ago. So I've been free of my alcoholic media for 4 years, and I'm still struggling with certain other media right now, but nothing like I was. I live in the steps, and I told you about the codependency program I found a year ago. That is amazing. And I found Debtors Anonymous a long time ago, and I've been recovered. I've been recovered in DA for about 10 years now. I'm very grateful. I have an action partner. We send each other our numbers. I keep my spreadsheets, and I don't have to do step work around money today, which is unbelievable. So, yeah. So now I have one sponsor for my 10 steps, whether it's about media or codependency or food. It's all the same. Once I've gone through the first 9 steps, those are good for coming out of denial about the nature of the disease. It's sometimes we absolutely have to do that. We have to join yet another fellowship just to hear people and get out of denial about how sick we are in that area. But I think once we go through the big book and the steps quickly and stay in 10, 11, 12, you don't need 4 different sponsors for this. I don't. So I have one sponsor, and then I have an MAA person that I check in with once a week about my use, what I'm doing with media right now. And, it's like a good connection. And I started a primary purpose group meeting in MAA about 6 months ago. So we have this big book. I've introduced this big book thing into MAA a while ago, and I have sponsees and they have sponsees. We're nothing's perfect. We fall on our faces. People are slipping and sliding with their media, whatever. There really is the tools approach and the step approach, and both have helped a lot of people. But the tools approach won't work for me. So, I use tools, but they don't keep me sober for 1 minute. So, so I love this journey I'm on. I really do. I love God. And lastly, I know I didn't say 20,000 different things, but I just want to say the way my religious life works with the 12 steps is amazing. Because let's face it, they created the 12 steps out of the Oxford group. The Oxford group created it out of the early Christians. And who were the early Christians? They were Jews or ex-Jews. So the bottom line is it all works together. God makes himself known in all kinds of ways. And my relationship with God just keeps getting deeper. And I've had amazing bottoms, amazing breakthroughs in all, I have amazing breakthroughs after horrible bottoms. And that keeps happening to me as I grow. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Golda. What an amazing share. And don't ever apologize for crying and being real. I love it. Love when people get moved in real time and are real about their work. I might even venture to say that that's the best part, right? Because it's like you're not just talking about connecting. You're not just talking about God. You're not just talking about, getting down on your knees. You're doing it live with those tears. So I love it. Really beautiful. So much covered here, people. So much covered. Codependency, which runs its thread through all addictions and afflictions. But we're all codependent if we're addicts because we're placing that dependency on something else or someone else instead of a higher power. Some of us are in the fellowship and some of us aren't. Overeaters Anonymous, food addiction. Debtors Anonymous, money. I'm going to invite you all to think about, what speaks to you, questions you have about your own personal program as a sponsee, as a sponsor. Please will you post those now in the chat. if you're really eager to jump in, you can unmute yourself. There's only a few of us, so I think that will be welcome. And please go ahead and put your questions in the chat. I guess we had AA in there too, right? I just remembering the beer and the yeast and all that. I'm going to ask you guys to think. Golda, how many people do you sponsor these days?
Oh my God, I just made a list yesterday. It's like crazy. I mean, yeah.
No, I mean at one given time, not total.
Oh, you mean like take through the big book? Like,
yeah, like how many people are you working with today?
Well, again, I have 10 steps coming in from like 5 or 6 different people. But in terms of going through, and we have to talk once in a while, you know, all that. How do I stop check? Anyway, but maybe I try to just do one person at a time, and it takes about 3 weeks, you know, but sometimes I do more. So right now I think I'm going to do 2 at a time. But it really is so joyous to go through the big book. Every time when I read out loud with them, it's like I'm giving them medicine, sharing medicine, and I'm getting it at the same time. So beautiful.
Okay. Brandy put a bunch of great questions in the chat. You could just go ahead and take it one by one.
Okay. Okay, so let me
just repeat the question first and then the answer.
Yeah. I just want to get a sheet of paper though, because there's one paper I want to be able to read from. But please, can you tell us more about your steps 10, 11, 12? Do you mind if I run and get this one piece of paper? All right, never mind. What I do is, it's very simple. I write what is disturbing me in my own words, one sentence, and keep it simple. I'm afraid because my husband looks like he might be getting sick again, God forbid, right? That, you know, one sentence. And then I have a list of defects under the category of selfish, dishonest, fearful, and self-seeking. And they're brilliant. Whoever made this list is unbelievable. And I just pick 1 or 2 of the defects that apply to that disturbance, type it out. This is all texting to my sponsor. And then, but I do each category: selfish, fearful, dishonest. Usually there's self-seeking in there. And then I say a prayer, any prayer I want, 1 sentence. And then I say, help someone. And I send that off to my sponsor. And then I contact a newcomer right away. That's basically how I do 10, 11, 12. And we all know 11 step, there's like 4 parts of the 11th step. That's one part. And then there's the morning meditation. And then there's the nightly inventory, right? And then there's pausing throughout the day. All of those are 11 steps, different aspects of the 11th step. How do did you mean spot checks? Or because you wrote, how do you stop checks? I don't think you meant that. Do you see where she wrote that? I mean, spot checks, right? You wrote that. Okay. So that is a spot check. What I just described is a spot check. This is what we do. My daily spiritual practice, I 99% of the time will say at least one formal Jewish prayer, like whether it's the morning prayer or the afternoon prayer or say Psalms. I'll do something like that. My early morning, I always say morning blessings that you say when you wake up and before you eat. And then I do my quiet time. Actually, lately, I've started to go out and look at the sunrise, the real sunrise, which you can't really see a real sunrise in Israel. At least I live in the north and I'm on the west, so I don't really see the real sunrise time, but like 10 minutes later, I get to watch the sun come up, and then I try to go I'm right by the sea where I live, so I watch the sunset, and that's very spiritual and amazing, and I talk to God, and how it helps my close relationships. Well, I learned something that I thought I was horrified by when I read this. I love to read Hasidic stories, you know, and I read that you can't say you love God if you don't love people. And I was, oh my God, I am in such trouble here because I thought I loved God and I knew I didn't love people. So I've been cultivating that and working on that. And then the I'm a recovered codependent now. So I really am loving people, you know, in action and thought, and sometimes often in feeling, but not always. But it really is wonderful that, I am learning, and I've been praying for that for decades. You know, please help me to love other people, love other Jews, love human beings. And of course, when you work with someone and you help with someone, I automatically loved anyone I helped. By the way, I was always like a healer type. Even when I was as crazy as a loon, my friends wanted me to help them. So there was some, you know, some qualities we're just born with, like, but yeah. So that's that. And I really do want to say that I had gotten to the point, but over a year ago, with all this step work and all this recovery and all these promises, I became a therapist. I moved to Israel. I married my soulmate. All these promises had come true for me. It was amazing, but I was losing everything in this because I didn't understand that codependency for some of us is a progressive, deadly disease unless it's treated separately. And I had gotten to the point I could barely leave the house. I was so paranoid about everyone hating me. And it's gone. I'm telling you, it's gone. It's unbelievable. I go to gatherings, I go to parties. I'm like, I can't believe it. It's so wonderful. Yeah, this stuff works. Can you share more about how you don't need to weigh your food as a food addict? Yeah. Well, first of all, I can't. I mean, I have tried to go back to that and it doesn't work. I just rebel. I just can't do it. It's like crazy. It's like I recoil as if from a hot flame from weighing my food. But the way, okay, okay. All my bottoms, I end up sobbing to God in the end. Like I'm desperate, right? That's how I found MAA. That's how I put my first alcoholic media down. That's how I did my first 4th step. So that's what happened with this. I was doing a million 10 steps about food. I was so frustrated. And one day, and I just kept praying and crying. And finally one day my sponsor said, so-and-so has this, I have gastritis. She said, so-and-so has this, maybe talk to this person. And I talked to her and I eat like a different diet. It's not a diet. I don't weigh and measure. I don't plan my meals, but I'm eating within a certain frame. I only eat certain types of food, period. And it has totally settled my stomach, settled my brain. My serotonin has gone up. You know, my dopamine has gone up. So, but this is like an Ebby thing. You know what I'm saying? It's an outside issue, the way I'm eating my diet. It's not a recovery, but for me, it's what I needed. God sent me the diet way of eating that would put my body and my mind at peace. So this was a total gift from God. You know, this is also what I wanted to say to everybody. There's no shortcut to the 2nd step and the 11th step. There's just no shortcuts. We have to have an active, somehow vibrant relationship. And it goes down, it goes dead, you feel like God hates you, he's gone. That's normal. But overall, we need to have a real relationship every day with God. That's our medicine. You know, that's what the big book promises. We're going to help you find a power greater than yourself so we could be of service. So that's all I say. And it grows, you know, relationships change and grow.
Amazing.
Anybody
Golda.
else?
I'm gonna
Yeah.
thank you so much here.
Sure.
We're gonna go ahead and wind down. if anyone has a burning desire, we are going to thank you for today. Thank you for sharing your experience with the hope, food, setting, alcohol, 12-step programs, sponsorships, other resources.
It's a little hard to hear you, Karen, frankly.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, much better.
Great. So I'm going to thank you for sharing your experience, strength, and hope on alcohol, on debting, on food, on sponsoring. I'm going to ask you to go ahead and put your number in the chat so people can reach out to you. And then I'm going to ask you to pray us out, because we wish everyone to have a beautiful day filled with recovery. I'm going to have to get off, but if anyone wants to stay the last few minutes of the hour and do Q&A with you, I think that would be wonderful. If that works for you, let everyone know.
I'm just typing here, okay? Just bear with me. 6, 8. Okay. So, yeah, you all know about living in Israel later than Eastern time. Okay. So do people, oh yes, so I'll do the prayer and then see if people have any more questions, or the other way around. Does anybody have more questions? You may not, you know, or someplace you're stuck in your step work or something, or Karen's laughing. All right, so let's just say the third step prayer together, if you want. God, grant us the surrender. I like to say the we version. God, I offer myself to you to build with me and do with me as you will. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do your will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them will bear witness to those I would help of your power, your love, and your way of life. May I do your will always.
There was a man put his hand by the side of his mouth, and he wanted to scream, but the sound never came out. So he reached for the bottle to wash the pain away, 'cause what he wanted so badly was to live a different way. And all of his problems and all of his pain filled up the puddle and rose with the rain. His ship kept on sinking to the bottom of the lake. For certain that he was just a fake, just a fake. Was a man put his hand by the side of his mouth, and he wanted to share, but only lies ever came out. So he reached for the needle to numb the pain inside, and the truth that he yearned for shriveled up and died. And all of his problems, all of his pain filled up the puddle kept on sinking. Bottom of the lake, he knew for certain that he was just a fake, just a side of his mouth as he read from the book, only truth spilled out. So he reached for a power to help him through the night. 'Cause what lives in the darkness dies in the light. Yeah, what lives in the darkness dies.